Hi guys, it's Dylan from Bijou Diamond Jewelry in London with a slightly different video to usual. Today we're going to have a look at my dream watch collection. A few people in the comments have been requesting this, so I thought I'd do my absolute dream collection and then at a later date I'll kind of do my more realistic collection. I've picked watches that I really like for a real reason and there's watches in there that range from £6,000 to much more than that. So let's have a look. I've picked 6 watches total. I could have definitely picked way more than that. I'll discuss other watches that didn't make it and why. I have 3 main favorite brands, and that is Audemars Piguet, Rolex and Patek Philippe, and so I featured 2 watches per brand. So let's start with my favorite brand, which is Audemars Piguet. I love the way they combine sort of classic, really incredible high-end watchmaking like Patek Philippe, but mix it with slightly cooler designs and funkier designs. And I like the modern looks of Royal Oaks and some of the other watches like the offshores that they produce. I think they're really interesting to look at. They're technically incredible, the way they're designed and made. AP uses really unique materials. They're actually one of the initial funders of Richard Mille, so they are really involved in the whole really unique and crazy concept side of watchmaking, and they're always breaking the boundaries of what's possible. And the pieces are really special that they create, and they also don't produce many of them per year. And for me, the most amazing watch they make is the Royal Oak, of course. I love that watch. I think it's really influenced the watch industry and I think it's an incredibly important watch. So the obvious choice would be the original 1972 Royal Oak, which was the reference 5402. But there's a few things that I'm not a huge fan of on that watch. So the next obvious choice would be the new one, which is the 15202, which is the jumbo again, or the ultra thin, which looks very similar to the original one, but just slightly more refined and kind of has their new modern touches to it. I don't love that one as much as my favorite one, which is the 15300 ST, which is the 39mm Royal Oak with in steel, and it has a blue dial. So it's very similar to the original 1972 reference 5402, the original jumbo. But for me, the thing I miss about those 2 ultra thins, the old one and the new one, is that we don't have a second hand. And I know that is how the watch was originally designed, but I really like a second hand. I think it reminds you the watch is not working, but kind of beating away, and I quite like that. It gives the watch a little bit more character, like it is actually doing something. Whereas if you've just got those 2 hands, the minute and the hour hand, it can look a little bit boring sometimes. That's my first reason why I prefer the 15300. The second reason is it's deeper, and I prefer watches that are slightly deeper. I think the ultra thin is a little bit too thin. It's very flat like the 5711, which I'm not a major fan of because it is so flat. I agree that the Royal Oak is meant to be a more dressy style watch and a bit more low profile, but I prefer something with a little bit more wrist presence. I also love on that watch that you've got your display case back, so you can see the movement inside, which is finished to such a beautiful quality. I love that 22 karat rotor with the Audemars and Piguet family crests on. Another reason I went for the AP is because I love the bracelet. I think the bracelet's probably the best bracelet in the whole Swiss watch industry. It's an absolute work of art. The finishing they put on this bracelet is incredible. It's stunning, the way it shimmers in the light. And also one of my favorite things about AP is the fact they do brushed watches, and most of the watches that they do, the Royal Oaks, are brushed finish. And it looks stunning. The way the light moves off the watch is incredible. Everything looks so angular and refined and sharp, and yeah, it's so much more special than a Rolex. When you see one in real life, you'll see what I mean. It is just so magical, and it's amazing to think that most of the watch is finished by hand. So that would be my kind of daily driver. I love the blue dial. I also like the white dial as well, but I think the blue dial, because it kind of is a little bit reminiscent of the original Royal Oak, that's why I'd go for that one. And the reason why I wouldn't go for the 41mm or the 37mm is the 37mm is slightly too small for me, and the 41mm is way too big for me. So the 39 is perfect. My next watch from AP is the reference 25829. And that is one of my favorite watches in the world, if not my favorite watch. It is pretty special for many reasons. I think it's got such an incredible look to it. And Audemars Piguet have actually been making moon phase calendar watches since 1924. Obviously at that time it was pocket watches. And the first Royal Oak Perpetual calendar was released in 1983. And that was a real breakthrough at that time. It was an incredible piece for the industry and clients as well. It was really unique. The reason I went for the open worked version is because it has this kind of ghostly spirit to it. With the sapphire crystal dial, so you have your subdials overlaid on there, and then underneath you have your movement visible. The hands have got such an elegant shape to them. They remind me a little bit of the moon in a way. I don't know why, but sort of space travel on the moon, and maybe even like a sundial. They've just got such an elegant look. It's such a hard thing to describe how this watch makes me feel, but it's got a vintage look to it. It almost reminds me of maybe what something Leonardo da Vinci would have created, or a contraption. It just looks like a really interesting watch that you'll never ever see something like it. And I would have this watch in the platinum. The reason I didn't go with the steel is because obviously I already have my 15300 blue dial. And that's a great sort of everyday watch for me to wear. And I think if you were to have this watch in platinum, the weight of it on your wrist, the presence and that incredible look would just feel so amazing. It would just feel like the best watch in the world. I know it's a really weird thing to say, but I've always said that if my parents died, that would be the watch I'd buy with the money they left me, because I think that has sort of like a spiritual look to it and a ghostly presence. It's just got way more depth than a normal watch does. Partly because obviously it's got a open worked dial, but I feel it's so magical and spiritual and just, yeah, it's a very hard feeling to describe. But yeah, to me, it's a very special watch. So that is it from AP. There are a few other watches that I would get from AP. They're obviously my favorite brand, as I mentioned. So there's plenty of watches that I would love to own from them. Probably a watch that I would add to my collection if I was to add more of them would be the 39mm Royal Oak Chronograph. Any of those steel ones with those dials, I think loads of them are really cool looking. I love the Panda and the white dial version. Some of the blue ones are really cool, and the black dial is really nice as well. The thing I love about that watch is you can add a rubber strap to it or a leather strap, and I think it completely transforms the look of the watch. I think that would be probably one of the best everyday wearers ever, and I am still considering putting that in the collection, if not maybe actually that being my next watch anyway now. So yeah, let's move on to Rolex now. So the first Rolex that I will choose is my favorite Rolex in the Rolex collection, which is the Daytona. I love this watch so much. I've owned one now, and I think the shape of it is so perfect. The proportions, they really, really suit me. And I think I'll probably always have a Daytona in my collection, whether it's a steel one or a platinum one or whatever. I think it always has a place in my heart. I love the history behind the Daytona. I love what they set out to do. And I love with Rolex that they are really about being a machine and something that you can really wear every single day and batter it around a little bit within reason, but they are designed to just keep on going. They're not designed to look pretty inside or be really nicely finished. They're designed to keep really good time and not necessarily need regular servicing. So yeah, I definitely want to have a Rolex in there just for everyday wear. But the Daytona I chose, is the obvious one would be obviously the steel Daytona. But for me, I don't have any, you'll see when you see the rest of my collection, but I don't have any gold watches that are colored gold. They're all platinum or white gold. So I wanted to put a rose gold watch in there because I love rose gold, and I thought the Daytona is one of my favorite watches in rose gold. So I chose the rose gold Daytona with the rose gold dial, or the rose dial with the diamond markers, and I think that is a stunning watch. I wouldn't usually go for rose gold. I don't really like blingy, shiny watches, and especially not with diamonds, but I think this watch is truly beautiful with that CD effect dial, that laser etched dial, and the diamonds. I think the way the light dances across this watch is amazing. I think rose gold looks really cool on me, and I love the Daytona in rose gold. I think it's a stunning watch. It's got a really nice solid weight feel to it. It doesn't feel tinny like some rose gold watches do. They can feel a little bit light. So yeah, I think even though this is not a watch I necessarily would wear that often, I do want to put it in my collection. If there were any watches in my collection that I would phase out or get rid of, it would probably be this rose gold Daytona, because I think if I owned it, I probably would only ever wear it in my home or indoors. You know, I wouldn't really wear it too often. Probably wouldn't be an important part of my collection, but I love the Daytona, and I think that rose dial with the diamonds is a really cool look. The next Rolex that I would choose is the Rolex Submariner, and specifically the Hulk, the green one. I think that's a great watch for every day. I would definitely put it on a strap because I think it looks super cool on a strap, especially a white strap. I think this watch just makes a great watch no matter how much money you're worth, or you know, how much you want to spend on a watch. I think it's a great piece to have in your collection. I would have put a vintage one in the collection, but I kind of want to go for more newer style pieces. So I went for the Hulk because I love the green. I think it's a really unique looking piece with the green. You don't see many watches like it. And I especially love that it has that CD etched dial like we see on that Daytona as well. I also like the fact that on the steel Submariners you have brushed, and as I mentioned with my Royal Oak, I really like brushed watches because they're not shiny and kind of in your face, which obviously ironically the Daytona is, and I've gone for it in rose gold with diamonds. But I love the Submariner on the bracelet, but it probably would live on the straps most of the time, whether it be a rubber strap or a pearl-on strap, and probably a white one. I love the clasp on the Submariner. I think it's great, the glide lock, and as I've mentioned in my review, if you haven't seen it already, it is a brilliant watch for everyday wearing because of that clasp and that adjustability. Next is my final brand, which is Patek Philippe. Let's start with one of the most famous Patek Philippe complications, and that is the perpetual calendar. I have already picked a perpetual calendar in my collection, which was the Royal Oak open-worked perpetual calendar in platinum, but I love the moon phase on a watch. I just think it's such a cool addition to a dial, and I love the perpetual calendar complication. I think it's really an amazing feat also, but also just a really useful feature. So Patek Philippe has been producing perpetual calendars since 1889, and they're actually the first brand in the world to put it on a wristwatch. So in 1925, they brought out the first wristwatch to feature a perpetual calendar, which is a really stunning watch. But the watches that mean the most to me are the 1526, which was released in 1941, which was the world's first production, mass production, well not mass because it's Patek, but mass production perpetual calendar wristwatch. So that's a really important wristwatch in watchmaking history. Another special watch is from 1961, which is the reference 3449 from Patek. Those two watches look kind of similar. They're very simple, very elegant, and very classic. So combining those two and bringing it into the modern collection, one of my favorite Pateks, and one that's really important in my collection, is the 5205G-013, which is brand new from Basel 2018. It's not one of the most popular ones, but it is a really, really stunning watch. And especially with this blue dial and the blue strap, I think it's one of the best looking watches in the whole of the Patek collection. I think it's amazing. And I love that CD effect dial like we see on the Rolex. It's that laser etch. I think it's stunning on this watch with the blue, and it kind of matches the moon phase. Yeah, it's one of my favorite pieces from Patek ever. I love the way the dial fades out into that darker color, and in the center it's kind of like a lighter blue. The 5205 has always been one of my favorite watches. I love it in the rose gold with the black dial. I love it in the -010 reference, which is the dark gray dial. But for me, this blue one, when I saw it when it got released at Basel this year, I thought it was just one of the coolest looking watches ever. It's so beautiful. I think I would honestly wear this watch almost every single day. I think it suits every occasion. I think if I was to get rid of all the watches in my collection and maybe just have one, it possibly could be this watch because it just looks great and suits every outfit. The blue is so timeless, but sculpturally this watch also is incredible to look at. The watch has these like vents or scoops near the lugs, which are really amazing looking. It's 40mm, which is absolutely perfect size-wise. It's also not too deep. It's actually slightly shallower than a Rolex Daytona. So it's quite a flat watch in a way, but it's got the look of quite a deep watch. Fits under a dress cuff perfectly. It's got this amazing sloped up bezel. It's just such an elegant watch. I can talk about it for ages. I love the dial. I love those triangular hands. Everything about the watch is so beautifully put together. Yeah, I could go on for hours about this watch. I think it's stunning. It definitely is one of my favorite watches in the world, and I was so happy when Patek released it this year. The next watch in my collection is really, really special. It's one of my favorite watches in the world, if not my favorite. I think it's probably the most perfect looking piece ever. This watch is the Patek Philippe 5204P-001, which is the split-second chronograph perpetual calendar grand complication watch from Patek. It is unreal. Let me first start by taking you back to 1880, which is when Patek made the first split-second chronograph. I'll just explain quickly what a split-second chronograph is. So a split-second chronograph basically has 2 second hands for the chronograph. So that means that when you start your chronograph, let's say you're timing a car going around a track, doing laps, you start your chronograph when it leaves the start line. Now let's say that the car is crossing the line, but it's continued to do another lap. You would then push the correct pusher, whichever one it is on that specific chronograph, to stop one of the second hands. And basically it allows you, once you've stopped that second hand, your other chronograph second hand continues to move around the dial. So you haven't stopped your chronograph, you've only stopped one of the hands. And that allows you to write down exactly what the chronograph time was for that, so how long it took the car to do that lap. And then once you finish writing it down, you can then reset it and it will join back to the other hand that's sweeping around the dial. So the chronograph hasn't stopped during this time, it's continued to move, but it's allowed you to just stop it and then note things down and basically time lapse. To be able to create a split-second chronograph is incredibly difficult. It's one of the most complicated things to do with a movement, along with a tourbillon and a minute repeater. And for that reason, Patek didn't actually manage to be able to get a split-second chronograph into a wristwatch until 1923. And that was the world's first split-second chronograph inside a wristwatch. And it was an amazing thing to be able to do because it's such a difficult thing to craft that movement, let alone put it inside a wristwatch. So the split-second chronograph is something that I find fascinating. I think it's stunning looking as well when those two hands split on the dial. It looks like a really interesting instrument, almost like an aeronautical or nautical instrument. But my favorite complication on any watch is an annual calendar with a moon phase. So that is why I have my open-worked AP with the annual calendar moon phase and my 5205 from Patek. So I wanted another Patek that has an annual calendar in my collection because I think they're amazing. And I also wanted a grand complication Patek. And so I decided to take my split second with my annual calendar and combine them into one and find a watch that had those two complications. And the watch that I found was the 5004 from Patek. And it was released in 1996. It was incredibly difficult for Patek to create that watch, and it was also incredibly expensive because of that. So Patek only actually produced 12 of those watches a year. I love that watch, and I especially like the last production ones they did in steel. For me, I don't really like that super small size of 36mm. I prefer a slightly larger watch than that. And there's also a couple other things on the dial that I don't prefer as much as I do on the newer version, which is the 5204. And the reason why I'm going for the 5204P-001, that very specific dial, gorgeous color, that warmth to it, but at the same time it's silvery and shiny and got almost the seedy effect that I love from those other watches in my collection. And those darkened hands and the indexes, everything it pops out, everything complements each other. The sub-dials with the Patek Philippe writing, even the little beveled edges on the day and month and your night and day indicator and your leap year indicator, everything's beveled out perfectly, just at a little angle. Everything's just about attention to detail and just pure perfection. And then if you turn the watch over and you look inside the watch through the exhibition case back, everything's absolutely stunning and perfect inside too. It's truly beautiful. Standard for Patek to be creating incredible watches inside and out. The attention to detail is unreal, and that is all what this watch is about. We've got welded lugs as well, which is even harder to create than normal lugs. So everything on this watch is just about pure, incredible watchmaking and not trying to shout out about it. It's stealthy. If you walked into a shop, no one would know that you've got a $300,000 watch on your wrist. It just looks like a standard watch. Everything about it is just very understated and all about incredible craftsmanship. I think this is probably my favorite watch in the world. I do love that AP open work perpetual calendar. However, this is just so special. There are a few other watches that I would maybe feature in. Richard Mille I do quite like, and the watch I feature from them would be the RM002, which is one of their first watches, and it is a tourbillon. It's smaller than the other watches in the collection. I do really like the RM27 and the dial, and I love the Bubba Watson tourbillon, the 38, but my favorite is the RM002. It's just perfectly proportioned. I like the second version though, which has the carbon dial. It's a truly beautiful watch, and it's magical to look at with that tourbillon ticking away. All their tourbillon watches are so magical. It's difficult to describe, and no pictures and videos ever do Richard Mille's any justice, because they are stunning in real life. But the reason I didn't feature it in my collection is that watch is probably about $400,000, and I could have my whole collection for that. So regardless of how rich I would be, I just couldn't bring myself to spend that much money on a brand that's only been around for a few years. And they don't have the pedigree and the history and the experience and the incredible craftsmanship that you see from Patek and Audemars Piguet. And they are really cool, but they're just not worth that money to me, in my opinion. There are a few other watches that I would put in the collection, like I mentioned, that AP, the 39mm Royal Oak, the chronograph. There are a few other watches from different brands that I maybe would put in, but those 6 are my favorite of all. If I was to get rid of some watches, I'd probably get rid of the 2 Rolexes. The Daytona, I don't think I'd really wear that much, but the Hulk is a great sort of everyday piece. But I don't love them as much as I love the APs and the Pateks. For me, they don't have the same incredible craftsmanship and finesse and beauty and character that the Pateks and the Audemars Piguets have. Thanks guys for watching. Let us know in the comments what your dream collection would be. And I'll be making a video soon that will be like my realistic collection. Let me know what you'd like to see in that collection. Maybe you can help inspire me to think about some watches that I haven't thought about before.